Okay, so today I want to show you how to add some colour to your Monoprint. You will have saved your Monoprint by scanning it, and so the size of it might be a bit kind of difficult to work with. So what I want you to do first of all, once you've opened your image, is to change the size or check the size of it. It's good to work with. So to do that, we're going to use the crop tool, which is this one here, and I'm going to make sure that on this little drop down here we have size and resolution selected. That will bring up this box. We'll make the width 10 centimetres, height 15 centimetres and resolution 300 pixels per inch. Obviously you need to click the little drop down arrows here just to make sure the right things are selected. And then OK. Now you might accidentally have cropped off a bit of your image in the process, so just make sure that you move your image around and so that you're happy with that until you tick the box here to crop it. Okay, now this is a black and white image, so we need to change the mode of it, so because we're going to be working with colour. So to do that we go image mode, and you'll see at the moment it's ticked on grayscale. We won't be able to do any colour to it at all until we put it on RGB colour. So check that that is correct first of all. Next thing is that because it's a background at the moment, background layer, there's lots of things that we won't be able to do on this image. So the first thing here to do is to right click and go layer from background, and it comes up layer 0. You can change the name of this, don't worry for now, and then just click OK, and you'll see that now all these things that were kind of faded before you can now use. So that's really useful. Okay, so we're going to add some colour to this image. First thing I'm going to show you is how to add some colour to the background, how to kind of do like a gradient where the colour changes from top to bottom. So in order to do this we need to select the image or the person first, and so we can kind of not work on them but just work on the background. So to do this, what I'm going to get you to do is to use this tool here. But first of all, it'd be handy to zoom in because we can't really see what we're doing at the moment that far away. So click your zoom tool or click Z on your keyboard and just zoom in so that you can see closely what you're working with. Now to move around the image while you're zoomed in like this, if you click the space bar and then the little hand symbol comes up, and then you can move around your image quite easily. Now I'm going to use this tool today, which is the polygonal lasso tool. I find that one quite good to use. There's lots of ways of selecting images, but this is a good one to start with. So I'm going to start here at the top of the head, and we've got part of the head missing. This works in a kind of dot to dot effect almost, and small kind of little line stages. So keep clicking around. You can make the distance between your clicks smaller or larger depending on how kind of subtle you need to be. Now I'm not going to be too careful today because obviously it will take a long time to do that, but you should spend quite a lot of time selecting this carefully. If you make a mistake and suddenly do that, don't panic, just click the space bar and it will kind of get rid of that last click and you'll be able to go back to where you were. So just show you that again. So just click the space bar, it releases the line again. Okay, and now we're on to this section here. Obviously we've got the rest of our image kind of below the visible screen, so the thing to do there is to just hover your mouse outside of the image area and it will allow you to get access to the rest of the image. Okay, and keep clicking, keep adding. Can't see what's going on here until we're there. Okay. So now the image kind of runs out where the person that printed it kind of didn't go down to the bottom of the page. So what I'm going to do is just click the line across to here, and we can decide how to crop that kind of once we've finished the whole thing. again an area there that we need to just kind of make up. You're going to get that quite a lot with the monoprint process. So, you know, it's not a really precise thing. It's supposed to be quite kind of hand-drawn looking, isn't it? So you don't need to worry too much. Okay, we are nearly close to the end now. When you get close to the end, make sure that you can see the whole of your image, and you'll find the original point that you started from, and you just click once to join the whole image, to whole selection together, and you'll see this thing called marching ants going around the outside of your selection. Now if you double click at the point where they join, then it will just disappear and you'll have to start again. So try not to double click. It can be a bit frustrating having to do the whole thing again. Now we need to zoom out again, so click on the zoom tool or click Z on your keyboard, and if you then click Alt, then you'll be able to zoom out. Okay. Right, so now we can see the whole thing. So what we're going to do is first of all select the background and not the person. Okay, so to do that is select inverse, because everything that we want to do, we want to do on the back. At the moment, we want to do on the background. So we've selected the background now, not the person. Okay, so we're going to use this tool here, the gradient tool. Okay, to select that area, to colour that area. So, but first of all, what we want to do is select the colours that we want to work with. So these two squares here are the foreground and background colours. So I'm going to first of all select maybe a blue for the foreground. So that will be at the top, and then I'm going to select a kind of green colour for the bottom. Okay, and now make sure we're clicked on the gradient tool, and then we're going to click at the top middle of our file and click and hold the mouse key down, drag to the bottom, and you'll see the background is now filled with this kind of gradient effect. Now it might be that you think that's a bit too bright, a bit too strong, a bit too dark, so you can adjust. So image adjust, let's maybe adjust the hue and saturation. So I'm going to make it less saturated, less strong colours. It's personal taste, so it's up to you as to how you want this to look. And then I've altered the lightness slightly. Hue, changing it, making it a bit more kind of bluey. And then OK. So now we're going to start working on the actual kind of figure. So if we first of all go select, deselect, and we'll zoom in again so we can see what we're doing a little bit more. Now, at the moment we have one layer, and on that layer we have obviously the image itself and then the background kind of coloured in there. It's going to be more helpful to do the work on the inside of the figure on a separate layer, and you'll see why a bit later on. It's just to do with what you can kind of bring back through. Okay, so let's make another layer. So to do this you go layer, new, layer. Okay, and then you'll see another layer will appear here. And so everything we do to the figure will be on this layer, and so they're separated out, which will be really useful later on. Okay, so I'm going to start off by colouring the hair in. Okay, so to do this, what I'm going to do is use the selection tool again, the polygonal lasso tool again, to just select around the hair area. The reason I'm doing this is because you could directly work with a brush and colour the hair, but it's a bit like when you're doing colouring when you're a child and you don't want to go over the edges, and it's really frustrating when you've gone over the edges. It kind of ruins your picture. So this will stop you from being able to accidentally kind of colour over the edges. You may find with other parts of the image, like the eyes for example, it might be easier to just do it kind of directly using the brush, but we'll come on to that a bit later on. Okay, so again, I'm doing quite a sort of quick job of this. So we're fairly close to the end. Now what can sometimes happen is you can kind of accidentally kind of not select part of the image that you want to select. So I'm going to show you in case that happens. So I've kind of selected all around the hair, but I've missed this bit out here. If that happens to you by accident, don't panic. Thing to do is to use this quick mask tool here. So click on here and you'll see that everything that's been selected so far shows up in white. Everything else shows up in kind of red. And what you can do is you can use the brush tool, which is this one here, to add in this part of the selection that's missing. So click on your brush tool. Make sure that white is selected on your background layer, on your colour picker here, and not black. If black is in the foreground, what will happen is when you start to brush, you'll actually be adding to the selection rather than taking away from the selection rather than adding to it. So switch those around. Okay, now my opacity is a bit low, so I'm going to bring that up to 100%, and we're going to add in that area. Now I've got a fairly small brush there. If your brush isn't small enough, then you can use this drop down arrow just to select a smaller size brush, and then you can be a bit more precise about your selection. And again, don't forget to use the zoom tool to zoom in to make it a little bit easier to see what you're doing. Okay, I'm using quite a big brush here, a bit too big, to add into that selection. And then at this stage, if you notice there are any kind of bits that you're not very happy with, so for example over here, maybe you would like to have added a little bit more into the selection, you can click on these arrows here, or click on this arrow here, and again paint with the red now to bring in those areas that weren't originally selected. Okay, so now a bit happier with that. So if we click on the mask tool again, you can see that now your selection is showing all of the hair, which is great. That's what we're looking for. Okay, there's a little bit over here that maybe should have been kind of selected out. We're not going to worry too much at this stage. Okay, so now you need to be on your brush tool again, and we're going to select a colour that we want to work with. So again, click on your foreground colour here. Maybe I'm going to go for like a brown hair colour, something like this, and click OK. Now we're working on this layer here, so you'll start to see things happening in there. So again, the brush is maybe a little bit small when we're doing colouring. It's a bit like if you're using a felt pen, you want a slightly bigger felt pen for a bigger area that you want to work with. Now if I start brushing here, you'll see that this is going very, very dark and solid looking, and it's covering all the black kind of nice subtle lines that were made on the original monoprint. So that's not looking great. You might like that effect in some parts of the image, and some images look quite nice with that kind of blocky colour, but I'm not really going for that look today. So what you can do is you can work with a slightly lower opacity. So you can click on here and you can start colouring. You can use the slider to alter the opacity a little bit, and you can start colouring. You can see that obviously the black kind of lines, marks that were made for the hair are starting to show through a bit more again. As you kind of work over this, it builds up the colour. Okay, so at the moment I'm feeling like I need to not start again, but get rid of some of the things that I've done. So what you can do is you can go Edit, Undo, and that will undo the last thing that you did, which isn't terribly helpful after a while. You know, you're kind of spending ages doing that. So the best thing is to use the History palette, which I'll show you where it is. If you go to Window and History, tick History, you'll see all these stages of what you've done to the image show up, and we can go back and back in time until we see that we have nothing. Okay, so I've gone back to here. I'm going to start again right from the beginning using less opacity when I'm colouring in. Now this History palette's a little bit in the way, so just click the double arrow there to get that out of the way. So I'm going to bring my opacity down, and if you start with something low, then you can always build it up. So I'm going to maybe bring it down to 30-ish. Okay, and you'll you'll see the colour starting to come through there. It's a little bit like colouring, you know, with a felt pen or kind of watercolours or something like that, and then building up the tone and colour. Okay, so that's a bit more subtle. Now if we want it a little bit darker than that, do the whole lot again. And if you work with quite a big brush, you won't get a horrible streaking sort of effect. Okay, so that's looking a little bit better. I'm starting to overdo it a little bit now, you can see. Okay, that's not too bad. Right, so now some of these black lines, it might be quite nice to be able to sort of see them a little bit more, possibly. So what you can do for that is you can use the eraser tool, which is this one here. Again, change the opacity because this can be quite a kind of harsh, not particularly subtle tool. So let's go down a bit lower on here and then maybe make your brush. Let's zoom in a little bit so we can see what we're doing a bit more. First of all, let's make our brush size a little bit smaller. Okay, so 16. And then we can start to actually maybe bring in some of the black back through. You can see it isn't a terribly subtle tool, so let's maybe make the brush even smaller. It just enables you to bring a bit of the black back through. Okay, so we can work with that a little bit later if we want to. Just going to zoom back out. Start to see what's happening. Okay, so let's go select, deselect. So we can now start to work on another part of the image. Maybe let's now just work on the eyes. So we'll zoom in, and this time we'll try to do this without actually making a selection. So we can just kind of add some colour into the eyes maybe here. So, okay, again, brush tool, let's select an eye colour. Okay, so maybe we'll select green. Kind of green eyes. And again, the opacity, make that a little bit subtle because eyes, obviously, you know, you do need to kind of be a bit careful with these. So let's change our brush size again, so we're not working with anything too strong. And then just add a little bit of green in here. Quite a subtle effect. Okay, and then maybe let's try working on the lips now. So we'll go for a reddish colour, and again keep the opacity lower, maybe make the brush size a bit smaller. Yeah, so we can do this a bit more subtly. Okay, so you can see how you can gradually build up this image. Okay, more colour. The inside of the mouth, sometimes difficult to know what to do with that area, so we'll leave that for the moment, see what that looks like. So let's have a little look when we zoom out how it's looking. Okay, so we've got obviously our face kind of area and hair, kind of quite a lot of work done on that. So it's now thinking about kind of the clothing and so on. So again, it might be a good idea to select the area of the blouse here. So let's use our selection tool again here. Polygonal lasso again, and zoom in. So we can be quite careful about our selection. Again, I'm going to rush this little bit. You might want to do something different with the kind of cuffs here. in a case of making things up a little bit again here, you may need to start using your quick mask mode a little bit. I've just made a little mistake there, so I'm going to go back. As I said earlier, there are lots of other ways to select, some probably quicker, and you will learn the ways that you prefer when you've been doing Photoshop for a while, but this is quite a good one to learn on. Okay, there we go, we're nearly there. And you can be as you can spend as much time on this as you want in a way. You can kind of get really subtle alterations to it, or do it fairly quickly. Okay, so we've sort of selected all of this area. Now, problem here, which I didn't really think about when I did the original background, and that is this area under the arm. So what we can do here is we can use Quick Mask again and select this area out of our selection. Okay, because we don't really want that bit selected. So remember, all the white area is the area that's selected. So we're going to make sure we're on foreground white. So sorry, just by clicking the arrows here, click on our brush, and make sure the brush is a little bit bigger, and change the opacity back up. And add this area in. Need to be on the brush tool. Okay, on brush tool here. So we've got our brush tool selected, white on the background, opacity 100%, and we should now be able to just paint this area in here. Let's see. Sorry, we actually need to be on the black on the foreground, not white. Okay. Sometimes gets a little bit confusing, adding and subtracting which colour you need to be on. Trial and error quite often is what you need. Okay, and let's just subtract that from our selection. Okay, so now when we go back to our selection mode, that area is no longer selected. So I'm going to fairly quickly colour in this blouse area so we can see what happens. So let's choose a colour for this. Colour picker here, maybe a kind of, I don't know, maybe a yellow or something. Something a bit crazy. Okay, let's make the size of our brush a bit bigger, because don't forget we can't go over the edges, because we've deliberately made it so we can't go over the edges. Now again, that's too solid, definitely too solid. We want to be able to see the black coming through. So what I'm going to do is just change the opacity a little bit of that. So I'm going to go back to my history palette again, get rid of that yellow that I just did there. Okay, and we'll try again, making it a little bit more subtle, changing the opacity down to about, say, 50%, something like that. So it's still a nice strong colour, but not too much. We can work fairly quickly on that. And notice that it's not colouring the area under the arm in there. Okay. And again, if we want to bring some of these kind of black lines through a little bit here, what we can do is we can use the eraser tool again, and we can just make sure our brush is slightly bigger. We can start bringing some of those through. There we go, so you can see it a little bit better. Change the opacity a little bit more, make it a little bit more. Okay. So you don't want to overdo this, you don't want to It's just, it might give it a little bit more definition in certain places. Okay. So obviously you can keep working on the image using the different techniques that I've shown you today. This area here should have been taken out of the selection originally when we did the background, so that's a mistake that obviously you need to be aware and careful not to make. Okay, so select, deselect, and just let's zoom out and we can see how our image is looking. So you can see it's building up quite nicely. I'm going to leave it at that because you know all the techniques that you need to use. Next thing to do is to, once you're happy with everything, is to flatten. There's only 2 layers there, but it's always best to flatten your layers before you try to save as a JPEG and then upload to your Tumblr. So we're just going to go layer, flatten image at the end here. Okay, and then file, save as, and JPEG, make sure it's a JPEG. Make sure that you save to your Apple cart, and if you have another device to save to, that's a really good idea to always have a backup copy as well. And then save. Now I do want to cancel that actually, I don't want to save it as that, I want to give it another name because I don't want to get rid of my original. So let's say Monoprint coloured JPEG and desktop. So always try and keep your original so that you can work on another copy if you want to at a later stage. A medium-sized JPEG is the best option for uploading to Tumblr, so quality 6 is fine. Okay, and that's the end of the tutorial.